degree Kelvin, 6000 degree Kelvin, right? And this is the black body radiation intensity on the y-axis, and the x-axis is the wavelength. What is the important thing that you notice here is that as the temperature increases from 4000 to 5000 to 6000, the peak intensity, the wavelength of the peak intensity decreases, right? That's one very important thing that you notice from this diagram. Also, the area under the curve, area under each curve also changes as the temperature changes. So higher the temperature, more is the area under the curve, right? So at higher temperature, more emission takes place, black body radiation. Okay, this is what you notice from this diagram. So in summary, the Planck law suggests a distribution that peaks at certain wavelength. Okay, these are the wavelengths. The peak shifts to shorter wavelengths for higher temperature. Okay, when the temperature increases, the peak is shifting towards lower wavelength. Okay, the area under the curve grows rapidly with increasing temperature. Okay, as temperature increases, the area also increases. This is what you notice. Now, this is another diagram which shows the solar radiation versus the Earth radiation quantity of solar radiation versus the terrestrial radiation with respect to the wavelength. Okay, so on the left side, when the wavelength is shorter, for shorter wavelength, it is the solar radiation intensity, and for the right side, when the wavelength is at longer wavelength, Earth radiation is emitted at longer wavelengths, then this is the quantity of radiation for Earth, right? And this is the basically the visible range. Okay, the visible range for the solar radiation, solar wavelength. Okay, so this is what is the comparison between the solar radiation and Earth radiation with respect to the wavelength. Okay. Then Weil's displacement law. Again, you have already studied about this law, but we will once again review it. It says that at any given wavelength, the black body monochromatic emissive power increases with temperature. Right. The wavelength lambda maximum of the peak decreases as the temperature increases. We have seen in the previous curve also the same thing, right? The lambda max, the maximum wavelength, decreases as the temperature increases. The wavelength at which the monochromatic emissive power is a maximum is found by setting the derivative of the previous equation with respect to lambda. Previous equation here refers to the Planck's equation that we have seen yesterday. Okay. So to get the wavelength of the maximum radiation, we can just differentiate that equation which we saw yesterday, which we'll see it again now, with respect to lambda, and we get the wavelength of maximum radiation. So this is the equation that we saw yesterday, E lambda T, that is a function of wavelength and the temperature is given by this expression, okay, where Hc is the Planck's constant, and when we differentiate this equation with respect to lambda, d by d lambda of this quantity, then it gives you the wavelength of the maximum monochromatic emissive power. Okay, and from this we get the very standard form of the Weil's displacement law that says that the lambda max is inversely proportional to the temperature. Lambda max will be equal to 2897.8 divided by T, right? So that means lambda max is inversely proportional to the temperature. Okay, as the temperature increases, the lambda max decreases, and vice versa. So this is the Weil's displacement law that you have studied earlier. So Stefan's-Boltzmann's law also you have studied earlier. What does it say that the maximum emissive power at a given temperature is the black body emissive power EB, denoted by EB, black body. Let me get the laser pointer. Okay. All right. Integrating this over all the wavelength gives the black body emissive power EB. That means this equation that you remember, E lambda T, that means function of lambda and t. And when you integrate over all the wavelengths from 0 to infinity, then it gives you the black body emissive power. And this is given by, again, this right hand side, you are integrating for all the wavelengths from 0 to infinity. So this gives you the black body emissive power. And so the E lambda T, okay, function of wavelength and temperature is equal to the ratio of this one times T to the power 4, where this is again denoted by a constant called sigma, and which is the Stephan-Boltzmann constant, okay, is equal to sigma to the power 4. So where sigma is the Stephan-Boltzmann law constant, okay. So this shows that the intensity of the black body radiation is proportional to the fourth power of the temperature. Now next is the emissivity, right? Emissivity. A black body is an ideal emitter that you know. The energy emitted by any real surface is less than the energy emitted by a black body at the same temperature, because black body is supposed to be the maximum emitter. So any other body emits less than the black body, okay, at a given temperature. At a defined temperature, a black body has the highest monochromatic emissive power at all the wavelengths. Standard statement that you know. The ratio of the monochromatic emissive power, E lambda, to the monochromatic black body emissive power, EB lambda, where EB indicates the black body emissive power for the wavelength lambda, at the same temperature is the spectral hemispheric emissivity of the surface, right? And this is given by epsilon lambda is equal to the ratio of E lambda divided by EB lambda, right? Is the ratio of the emission at a given wavelength lambda to the black body emission for the same wavelength, and that is the emissivity, okay, at a given wavelength. The total hemispheric emissive power is then given by E is equal to, again you are integrating for all the wavelengths from 0 to infinity, E lambda d lambda is equal to 0 to infinity for all the wavelengths, epsilon lambda EB lambda d lambda. Okay, so this is the total hemispheric emissive power, okay, at a given wavelength. Now we define average hemispheric emissivity at a defined temperature. It's given by epsilon is the ratio of integration over all the wavelengths E lambda d lambda divided by the integration of all the wavelength of the black body radiation, and this is equal to, again, same thing. This is just expanded E lambda in the form of, in terms of this one, epsilon lambda EB lambda d lambda. Okay, so this is what is the average hemispheric emissivity, okay, at a given temperature. Here, epsilon can be interpreted as either the emissivity of the system, which is wavelength independent, or as the average emissivity of a surface at that temperature. Okay. A surface whose properties are independent of the wavelength is known as a gray surface. Right? So now you know the difference between a black body and a gray body, a gray surface and a black body surface. Right? A gray surface is the surface whose properties are independent of the wavelength. Okay. So you should remember this definition, because it can come as a MCQ, right? Sometimes. The emissive power of a real surface is given by E is equal to epsilon times EB, where this B indicates the, again, black body emission, right? So emissive power of a real surface is equal to epsilon times EB, okay, where epsilon is this one, which is the average hemispheric emissivity, okay. So now let's see the physics of scattering, absorption, and emission. Okay, this also we have studied in the first semester. Physics of the scattering, absorption, and emission. The scattering and absorption leads to extinction of radiation, right? Decrease of the radiation because of the scattering and absorption due to the presence of the aerosol particles or clouds in the intervening atmospheric layer. The contribution is linearly proportional to three things. Okay, that means the extinction of the radiation is proportional to three things. One is the intensity of the radiation, second is the local concentration of the gases and or particles, and third thing is effectiveness of the absorbers or scatterers. So the extinction coefficient depends on these three things. Now let's consider a beam of radiation passing through a layer of atmosphere as shown in this figure. Now, there is a beam of radiation, and this is considered as an atmospheric layer. Let's see, this is a layer of the atmosphere. So the radiation beam is passing through this layer of the atmosphere. Now this beam initially, before passing through the atmospheric layer, has an intensity I lambda. And it is incident upon this atmospheric layer, whose area is ds, given by sec theta d theta. And as it passes through this atmospheric layer, depending upon the presence of aerosols or whatever dust particles or whatever clouds, etc., in this layer, this beam of radiation will have extinction, and it will decrease as it passes through this layer. And this is indicated here by I lambda minus d I lambda, where I lambda was the incident radiation before passing through this layer, and minus d I lambda is the extinction because of the presence of all these aerosol particles in this layer of the atmosphere. So for each kind of gas, molecule, and particle that the beam encounters, its intensity is decreased. Whatever it encounters in this layer of the atmosphere, its intensity is decreased by di lambda is equal to minus I lambda k lambda n times sigma ds. So this is the decrease in the intensity, where I lambda was your incident radiation or initial intensity of the radiation. And other parameters like n is the number of particles per unit volume in this intervening layer of the atmosphere. Sigma is the areal cross section of each particle present in this layer. K is the scattering or absorption efficiency, and ds is the differential path length along the ray path. So this is the decrease in the intensity of the radiation as it passes through this layer of the atmosphere because of the presence of all kinds of particles in this layer. Now, it is sometimes convenient to express the rate of scattering or absorption in the form di lambda is equal to minus I lambda rho r k lambda ds, where rho is the density of air, r is the mass of the absorbing gas per unit mass of air, and k lambda is the mass absorption coefficient. So this is how generally we indicate the extinction or the change in intensity of the radiation as it passes through a layer of the atmosphere, and that will depend upon the density of the air, the mass of the absorbing gases in that layer, and the mass absorption coefficient. Contributions of scattering and absorption to the extinction of the beam of radiation is given by k lambda, which is the extinction of the radiation, is equal to scattering plus the absorption. The total extinction of the radiation is the sum of scattered amount plus the absorbed amount. This is the total extinction. So scattering by the air molecules and the particles are, at any given time, a wide variety of particles of different shapes and sizes, as well as cloud particles, droplets, and ice crystals may be present. So for scattering by a spherical particle of radius r, the scattering, absorption, or extinction efficiency k lambda can be prescribed as x is equal to 2 pi r divided by lambda. R is the radius of the particle, lambda is the wavelength, and this x denotes how much it is scattered. Are you all hearing me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So this provides us, a wide varieties of explanation of different phenomena that occurs in the sky. From here, we try to explain different types of features or phenomena that occurs in the sky, like formation of halo around the sun, the relay scattering, the Maya scattering, etc. Okay. So for visible spectrum, X ranges from very less than 1, much less than 1 for air molecules, okay, to 1 for haze and smoke particles, and much greater than 1 for raindrops. Okay. How much it is scattered will depend upon these types of particles, like X will be much less than 1 for the air molecules, and for haze and smoke particles, and much greater than for the raindrops. Particles which X much less than 1 are relatively ineffective at scattering radiation. Right? When the X is much less than 1, then they are ineffective for scattering. For Rayleigh scattering regime, the scattering efficiency is given by K lambda proportional to the inverse fourth power of the lambda. Okay, this is the Rayleigh scattering regime. So, similarly, the Maya scattering regime is given by X ranging from 0.1 to less than or equal to 50. That is Maya scattering regime. And the examples of the Rayleigh scattering that you see very commonly in the sky are, for example, rainbow, okay, halo, and many other features, such features in the sky. Now, this diagram is showing you two rainbows, right? A primary rainbow and a secondary rainbow, okay, which is weaker than the primary rainbow. Okay. Halo, this halo is around the sun, okay, formed by a thin layer of cloud consisting of the ice particles, okay, in the sky. This is the primary halo. You can also see very faint here, the secondary halo, okay, secondary halo. So these are all formed because of the Rayleigh scattering. Now, what does it say? Now, this diagram illustrates the percentage of scattering of direct sunlight with respect to different wavelength. X-axis is the wavelength, and y-axis is the percentage of scattering of direct sunlight. Okay, so the sunlight scatters off the molecules of air, and because blue light is scattered maximum than any other color in the spectrum because of its wavelength, okay, it's much smaller, the sky appears blue to human eyes. And you can see that this is the blue design, okay, and which has got the maximum scattering, right? Maximum scattering. So sky looks blue because of this maximum. These you have already studied. You must have studied in your even BSc graduation level or even before that in the school level. Right? Rayleigh scattering that occurs because of the Rayleigh scattering. There are other examples, interesting examples that how, with respect to the sizes of the scattering particles present in the atmosphere, how the scattering will take place. For example, this is one type of particle in the atmosphere. This is another type of particle with a different radius. This is another type of particles with a different radius. So when the incident beam, when the sunlight falls upon these kind of particles, it is scattered in different ways. So this diagram is showing the angular distribution of the radiation at visible wavelength, that is 0.5 micron, scattered by spherical particles with different radii. A indicates radius of 10⁻⁴ micron, B indicates the radius of 0.1 micron, and C indicates the radius of 1 micron. So this 1 micron particle has the maximum scattering, as you can see that. The forward scattering for 1 micron aerosol is extremely large and is scaled for present purpose. Actually, it can go even beyond that, but it's scaled here in the diagram. Okay. So this is the particle whose size is approximately 1 micron. Okay. In this diagram, again, similar things are illustrated. For example, this is the Rayleigh scattering design. This is the Maya scattering. Okay, this and these are Rayleigh scattering of the sun's. This is sun. Okay, as sun rays is passing through the atmosphere, and an observer, a person is standing here. Okay, how to his eye, things will look differently because of the delay in Maya scattering. So when there is a large particulate matter in the air, when particle sizes are larger, the forward lobe of the Maya scattering is dominant. Okay, forward lobe is dominant. Since it is not very wavelength dependent, we see a white glare around the sun. Okay. From the overhead, the relay scattering is dominant. The Maya scattered intensity being projected forward. Since relay scattering strongly favors short wavelength, we see a blue sky. Okay, so different types of nature's phenomena that we see visibly in the sky because of the relay scattering, because of the Maya scattering, because of the presence of particles or molecules or the aerosols of different sizes. Okay. This diagram also illustrates the amount of scattering by different types of molecular particles present in the atmosphere with respect to wavelength. X-axis is showing the wavelength, y-axis is saying the radius of the particle, and these radius are for different particles like this. For the air molecules having radius of 10⁻³ micron, smoke, dust, haze having radius of 10⁻⁻1 micron, cloud droplets having radius of about 10 micron, drizzles about 100 microns, raindrops about 1000 micron. Right? So for different particles present in the atmosphere, whether it is a raindrop or haze or smoke, aerosols, etc., how the scattering changes according to the wavelength. And again, for different types of radiation, this for solar radiation, that is for shorter wavelength, terrestrial radiation, okay, and these are the wavelengths for the larger, like weather radars and all, right? So this is the geometric optics, Maya scattering, x equal to 1, Rayleigh scattering, negligible scattering, and so on. Okay. So further, another important thing is the absorption. The absorption by the particles, absorption of radiation by the particles. So when x is much greater than 1, okay, then the extinction coefficient approaches 2. When the scattering coefficient is approximately 1, then there is a strong absorption. Whereas when the scattering coefficient is equal to 2, that means the absorption is negligible. Okay. When radiation interacts with matter, it is absorbed, scattered, or emitted, as you know, in discrete packets called photons. Now each photon contains energy E is equal to h nu. Okay, and h is the Planck's constant, u is the frequency. Okay, the Planck's constant is given by this much joules. So the absorbing continua. See, because of this characteristics of the absorption, we see in the atmosphere different types of features like atmospheric window or the transparent to different gas particles, etc., etc. So the extreme UV ultraviolet radiation, whose wavelength is much less than or equal to 0.1 micron, emitted by the sun's outer atmosphere, is sufficiently energetic to strip electrons from the atoms, and this is called the photoionization. Photoionization, you should remember this definition. What is photoionization? There is the stripping of the electrons from atoms by the UV radiation having the wavelength less than or equal to 1 micron. Okay, photoionization. So radiation in this wavelength range is absorbed in the ionosphere at altitudes above 90 km and above, giving rise to sufficient numbers of free electrons to affect the propagation of radio waves. You have studied these things in your physics, I'm sure. The radiation at wavelength is equal to 0.24 micron is sufficiently energetic to break oxygen molecules apart into oxygen atoms, a process referred to as photodissociation. Right? Earlier this was photoionization, and now this is a photodissociation, which means breaking of the oxygen molecules by radiation of wavelength approximately 0.24 micron. Okay. The oxygen atoms liberated in this reaction are instrumental in the production or formation of ozone, because the ozone particles are and oxygen particles are liberated or they break down. Okay. So photoionization and photodissociation. You should remember these definitions. So absorption line. Okay. The radiation at visible and infrared wavelengths does not possess sufficient energy to produce photoionization or photodissociation. But under certain conditions, appreciable absorptions can nonetheless occur. Okay. At visible and longer wavelengths, absorptivity is described in terms of a line spectrum consisting of extremely narrow absorption lines separated by much wider gaps in which the gas is virtually transparent to incident radiation. That's called the atmospheric window. Okay, atmospheric window. And that occurs due to the presence of gases, okay, which has different characteristics. For example, this diagram illustrates the absorption versus different wavelength. X-axis is the wavelength, Y-axis is the absorption. And for different ranges like this, for the UV, ultraviolet wavelength, visible wavelength, near infrared radiation wavelength, far infrared radiation wavelength, long wave, thermal, etc. for different wavelengths. And these are the different types of gas molecules present in the atmosphere. For example, oxygen, ozone, water vapor, okay, etc. Carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and so on. Okay. So different gases, whether they are oxygen, ozone, water vapor, etc., they display different characteristics of absorbing the atmospheric radiation in different wavelengths. For example, this range, this band, is the solar window band, because here the water vapor, okay, has a wide gap here, okay, of the absorption line. The absorption is minimum here. In this range, the absorption because of the water vapor is minimum. This is the line indicating the absorption. Okay. So whenever there is a minimum of absorption because of the presence of gas particles, then that is considered the atmospheric window. Because when the absorption is minimum, then maximum radiation can escape the atmosphere. Similarly, here also we have got the minimum absorption. This black line is minimum here, and this is the because of the ozone O3. Okay, except this one peak here, but otherwise the line is minimum. So this is the atmospheric window because of the presence of the ozone, and this is what we try to exploit in designing the sensors for the satellites. In the satellites, we see different channels. In this channel, this is sensitive, like water vapor is sensitive for this channel, or fog particles are sensitive to that channel, etc., etc. So we try to extract or infer the information about the presence of different gas particles or different other phenomena in the atmosphere by the satellite observation because of this characteristics of different gases. Okay. Then there is another important terminology that you should remember is the Doppler broadening. Doppler broadening, you know the Doppler effect, right? Now you have studied what is Doppler effect. So Doppler broadening is again similarly related to the Doppler effect because of the movement of the particles, okay, atomic particles in the atmosphere. Okay. The Doppler shifting of frequencies at which the gas molecules experience the incident radiation by virtue of their random motions, because the molecules will have random motions. So the shifting of the frequency because of that random motion towards or away from the source of radiation is called the Doppler broadening. Okay, Doppler broadening. You should remember this definition. Similarly, there is also pressure broadening. Pressure broadening, also called the Lorentz broadening. Okay. Pressure broadening or Lorentz broadening is a line shape or collision broadening is due to the molecular collisions. The collisions of molecules because of their random motions that occurs in the atmosphere and which accordingly will absorb the atmospheric radiation in different ways. It's called the pressure broadening or Lorentz broadening or collision broadening, and so on. So you should again remember these definitions. This diagram illustrates Doppler broadening versus the Lorentz broadening. Okay, this blue line indicates the Doppler broadening, and red line indicates the Lorentz broadening. Okay, or difference k nu and nu minus nu divided by alpha scale to alpha. So this is a contrasting absorption line shapes associated with the Doppler broadening and pressure broadening. Okay, the areas under the two profiles, under the blue and red profiles, are indicative of the line intensity S, and this area is the same. Total area under this blue curve or the red curve is the same. So this is the Doppler broadening and the Lorentz broadening. So we have covered the basics of the radiative processes or the radiation theories of the atmosphere. So now we go on to the next topic, which is again important topic, radiative transfer processes. Also partly you have covered these things now in your first semester physics of the atmosphere. Okay, so we'll discuss this once again here. We'll be refreshing for you. First we shall discuss the short wave radiation component, and then we shall go on to the long wave radiation component. Shall we continue today, or we shall continue this topic again tomorrow? What do you think? Are you all with me? Are you listening to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have to be almost 12:20, and we have a class at 12:30.
So we have the internal exam.
Oh, 12:30. 12:30.
Not 12:30, sir. 2:30. 2:30.
2:30. Okay, so 12:30.
At 12:30, I think the other geoscience elective will be there.
Geoscience. Okay. So maybe I can give you a bit early or 10 minutes early so that you can study for your program if you want to. Is that okay? Or do you have any questions or etc. now you can discuss in this time before we start tomorrow the radiative transfer process? What do you think, Rahul?
Yes, sir. We discuss in the next class.
Yeah, I see some people have dropped out. I see only how many? 8 people now. 4 people have dropped out. So what happened to them? Whether they have not come, or they have problem with the power or internet, I don't know. Or they are preparing for the examination. So any point to discuss?
So how do they measure all the radiation and all?
How do they measure?
Yes.
Well, actually, the thing is that at the ground we have some instruments for radiation measurement. Like we have the pyranometer. We have pyranometer. There is a pyranometer. Yeah. Then we have got
Radiometer.
So sometimes recorder, net radiometer, right? And also sometimes we tie along with the radiation balloon another instrument called radiometer. Okay, the radiometer, as it ascends with the balloon, it measures the fluxes of the radiation at different layers of the atmosphere. Generally, that we don't do on a regular basis. Like every day, we fly the radiation balloon twice a day generally. But that radiation measures only the profiles of temperature, moisture, the wind, speed, direction. It doesn't measure the radiation. But in a special observation Cambrian, we also tie up with another instrument called radiometer, and that measures the fluxes of the radiation in different layers of the atmosphere, both incoming, like if it is passing through a layer of the atmosphere, the incident radiation in that layer, and the one which is outgoing from that layer also is measured. So that is another one. The other things, of course, radiance. Satellite measures radiance that that's so important for our NWP. The sensors of satellite, which are designed to measure these radiances, they measure the radiance, and that we assimilate in the model. Okay, in the data assimilation, that is one of the very important source of observation. And you had a question, multiple choice question, MCQ, last time, that what has the maximum impact on the quality of the forecast? That was one of the MCQ. And studies have shown, they try to study sensitivity forecast for each type of observations that we collect, starting from AWS to radiosonde to pilot balloon to radar observations to satellite observations and all sorts of observations. And it is found that the satellite has the maximum impact because of the very virtue of the coverage. The places where we can't have the observatory, that is covered by the satellites only, over the vast areas of the ocean. We have no source of data except satellite. So satellite has maximum impact. When there was no satellite earlier in 80s, then this entire southern hemisphere used to be blank except where there is a land like Australia or South Africa. And those places, there are some observatory, but the vast ocean land had no observatory. And only ships, when they used to pass through the ocean, that they used to report some observation, otherwise no observation. With the presence of the satellite, we have got coverage of the observations over the entire oceans in the northern as well as the southern hemisphere, and also over the remote places, like very remote places over the mountains. We don't have the observatories, so those places are again covered by such remote sensing. Right? So that's how radiation is measured by ground-based instrument, by balloon-based instrument, and by satellites, different instruments. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Good. Any other point? We still have time. Only 12:23 in my watch. Avadi?
So what is difference between albedo and single scattering albedo?
Albedo and single scattering albedo. Now albedo, you know, right?
Yes, sir.
Now what is albedo?
It is the ratio of how much means radiation we receive and how much is reflected back.
Right. So actually, it is indicating the total reflected amount of radiation from a surface, isn't it? From the Earth's surface. Generally, when we say albedo, we refer to the Earth's surface, the albedo of the Earth's surface, right? Like sandy surface has a different albedo, water surface has a different albedo, snow surface has a different albedo. So there is a total albedo, total reflection. Okay. Now, when you say single scattering albedo, that means you're suggesting that it is the reflection because of the presence of different particles, single particle. Every particle will have a reflectivity, right? Every particle will reflect, isn't it? So
Yes,
the reflected amount of radiation by individual particles, single scattering albedo. That's what it refers, and that is very important also, because especially in the radiation parameterization, the two very important things are the single scattering albedo, the optical depth. Also, actually, all these things we are studying, but eventually, when you look into the model tries to utilize or calculate the optical thickness. Okay. Sorry, so is that okay? Are you hearing me?
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I was saying that in the NWP model or any atmospheric general circulation model, when we calculate this radiation, we need to know the cloud amount, the aerosol particles, etc. Now, the aerosol particles generally they don't change every day so frequently. Whatever is there now will remain the same almost after 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, or even by evening also, the same aerosols will remain. Now it will change, but it will change very slowly with time. Whereas clouds will change very rapidly, right? The clouds will change very rapidly. You can see that now. The types of clouds change, the amount of clouds change, the height of the cloud change, and they keep on changing. So we need to know very accurately the information about the clouds for NWP model, right? And so the clouds have to be calculated somehow in the model. We have the observations of the clouds also, of course, from the satellite observation, also from the ground-based observation, but that is all manual. So these things we try to calculate or diagnose from the model, the information about the clouds, because depending upon the type of the cloud, radiation will accordingly be modulated, right? Radiation will be modulated, whether it is scattered or absorbed or emitted, that will depend on the cloud. So the clouds are very, very important. And still people say that the cloud climate feedback, the cloud radiation feedback is not very perfectly known. There are so many uncertainties, right? You don't know how much is exactly the hydrometeor contents in the cloud, right? How much of ice particles, how much of liquid water, etc. And because each of them will scatter, absorb, and reflect according to their own way. So all these things will impact the calculation of the radiation or radiative fluxes in different layers of the atmosphere, right? So these are important, very important things, but they are still very uncertain. And so one of the uncertainties in the climate models is because of the clouds, right? So cloud radiation interaction, and what do we try to know? We actually try to know the optical thickness. Optical thickness, as you know, it will depend upon the amount of the gas particles or the amount of the clouds present in a layer of the atmosphere. That layer will be accordingly optically thick or optically thin, right? Optically thick, that means it will absorb more, or optically thin, it means it will absorb less, right? So we need to calculate the optical thickness, and also it will depend upon the radius of the particles, right? As you see that now, the atmospheric radiation is highly sensitive to the radius of the particle, right? So we need to know the radius, and we cannot measure the radius of each and individual particles, right? So we try to just have a statistical representation called the effective radius, not the actual radius of each and every particles. There will be hundreds and thousands of types of particles of different sizes and shapes. So we cannot afford to compute all those radius of all the particles. So we just try to compute the effective radius. So in the model, we try to compute the effective radius of the particles and the optical thickness, and they are all calculated based upon the cloud microphysics. From the cloud microphysical parameterizer, we try to estimate those things, right, for the model, and then use that for the cloud radiation interaction calculation. Okay, is that okay? So
Yes, sir.
yeah, so now it's already 12:30, so we could stop. Okay, otherwise some people will get delayed, right? So I'm going to stop this recording. Stop recording, and today it is saved in my own area. So very good.